Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Next slide, please. Once again, we'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, Classroom Engagement Strategies to Support Mental Health. Next slide, please. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, housed at Rutgers in the School of Health Professions and the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Kati, and I will be facilitating this webinar today. The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health and other related workforces to deliver evidence-based and empirically supported practices to individuals with mental illnesses. Please visit the MHTTC Network website for additional information at mhttcnetwork.org. And if you're interested in staying up to date, next slide, please. And if you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products the Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC is providing, please sign up to receive our email communications. You can sign up by using the bit.ly link provided on the screen, or I will share this in the chat box with you as well. Following the webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform our future activities. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to the completion of these surveys. So we thank you in advance for your feedback. We also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website along with the PowerPoint slides in the next couple of days. This presentation was prepared for the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. All material appearing in this presentation, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is in the public domain and may be reproduced or copied without permission from SAMHSA or the authors. Citation of the source is appreciated. We ask that you not reproduce or distribute this presentation for a fee without specific written authorization from the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. At the time of this presentation, Tom Codier served as Acting Assistant Secretary for the Mental Health and Substance Use at SAMHSA. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS, SAMHSA, for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. We encourage you to interact with our presenters during the webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A times toward the end of the presentation. During the webinar, our presenter may post questions to you, so please use the chat feature to answer those questions. We'd like to remind our participants that the MHTTC network uses affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all of their activities. This includes language that is strength-based and hopeful, accepting of diverse cultures, genders, perspectives, and experiences, is healing-centered and trauma-responsive, language that invites individuals to participate in their own recovery journey, language that is person-first and free of labels, language that is non-judgmental and avoids assumptions, language that is respectful, clear, and understandable, consistent with our actions, policies, and products. Next slide, please. So now let's begin our webinar. We have with us Dr. Carabel Sanabria Velez and Ms. Christy Rivalski. Ms. Rivalski joined the MHTTC team in 2020 as a school-based training and consultation specialist. Prior to joining the MHTTC team, she supported school teams with coaching, training, and technical assistance in the areas of social emotional learning, school mental health, and positive behavior interventions and support. She brings more than 15 years of experience in implementing and maintaining evidence-based practices in a variety of settings. She is passionate about improving the educational and social outcomes for urban communities, and she has worked extensively in urban districts of Philadelphia and Newark, working within schools and partnering with many inner city grassroots faith-based organizations and local universities to align school-wide behavioral and mental health efforts within the local community. Dr. Sanabria Velez is currently our Senior Training and Consultation Specialist and our Mental Health and School Mental Health Lead for Puerto Rico. She is also a fully bilingual clinical psychologist. She has over 7 years of clinical and research work performing with federal, community, and nonprofit organizations. Using the knowledge gained with her postdoctorate degree in trauma, she developed and provided workshops, documentation, and psychoeducation with an evidence-based methodology to foster and increase the resiliency of the Puerto Rican population. Carabel has worked on federal proposals targeted at helping minority and Hispanic populations who suffered during and post Hurricane Sandy in New York City. She has also collaborated as a therapist and consultant in the development of new proposals for projects with the purpose of training mental health specialists in resiliency and trauma post Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. So I'm going to turn it over to our presenters, and again, welcome everyone.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so happy to be here with you today. My colleague and myself are excited to talk to you this afternoon about classroom engagement. So our session objectives are really to define what student engagement is, to describe some social emotional learning strategies that will increase student engagement in the classroom. And that ultimately at the end of this presentation, you will have developed a classroom engagement plan that you will be able to implement in your classroom moving forward. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. We will provide 2 breaks during today's workshop. We know that this is scheduled to go until 2:30, I believe. So we do think it's incredibly important to provide time for us to, again, just get up, stretch, grab water, coffee, tea, whatever you need to, be comfortable in this space. Although this is a webinar, we try to make it very engaging. So as Kati mentioned, there will be times that we ask you to type in the chat or participate in poll questions. Just so you know, all the poll questions are anonymous. So Zoom summarizes those responses that are entered, and we share that summary response with you. And if at any time during the session you need to communicate with us, we just ask that you type into the chat or type into the Q&A box. The person that's presenting may not be able to readily see that information, but either somebody from our team will definitely be paying attention to the chat box and the Q&A to let the presenter know. Lastly, to get the most out of today's session, you will need a pen or a pencil and a few pieces of paper. We will be engaging in some activities. And I think that a lot of the information that we're going to provide to you today, hopefully you will find it incredibly helpful and you'll be able to use it going forward. So you will need, like I said, just a pen or pencil and a few pieces of paper. So before we get started, we wanted to start with an icebreaker. And before I provide the directions to this icebreaker, the icebreaker is actually a question. So I'm going to start with the question first, just so that way you can at least be thinking about your response. And then in a minute, I'll explain how we're going to collect those responses and look at those responses. So I want you to think of something a teacher said to you when you were a student that made a long-lasting impact on you. Okay, so the question is, think of something a teacher said to you when you were a student that made a long-lasting impact on you. And it could be from when you were in grade school, right? So something maybe as young as 1st or 2nd grade, it could be something, a teacher said to you in high school, just something, or it even could be a mentor, right? So just thinking of something that a teacher said to you when you were a student that made a long-lasting impact on you. So keeping that in mind, we're going to put a link into the chat. We're going to ask you to open up another browser, okay? And we're going to click on that link. And I'm going to navigate and show you what we're going to do here. All right, so once you click on that link, it will take you to this screen here is what you should see. You'll see that the screen is divided into 3 sections: positive, negative, and neutral. So whatever that was, right, that the teacher said to you, what I want you to do, and this is really cool, this is called a Jamboard. It's part of Google's, one of the amazing features that Google has, is you will see on the side, on the left-hand side or my left, right, there is a panel here of things that you can click on. There is an option to click on a sticky note. You're going to type in what it is that that teacher said to you that had a long-lasting impact. So I'm going to show you and I'm going to model what this looks like. So for me, I'll just say, you know, teacher said, Christy, you are an amazing presenter, right? Can't spell here. Keep up the great work. Right, I click save. And then I can move that Post-it note to if that statement was positive, negative, or neutral. And take your time. I see some folks kind of trying to get onto the Jamboard, and that's okay. So we're going to take a moment again, using the Post-it feature. Like I said, on the side here, it actually looks like a little, the icon looks like a little Post-it. You're going to click on it and you'll see this sticky note option will come up. You can change the color of it. You do not have to put your name. So you don't have to put your name. Again, you're just putting in what was that comment that a teacher said that had a long-lasting impact. And based on the comment, you're going to decide if the comment was positive, negative, or neutral and put it under those categories on the Jamboard.
Christy, we have somebody in the chat that
Mhm.
shared with us. It says, in first grade, teacher said, I can read, keep up with the good work.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if they said that, I'm going to copy their response and I'm going to put it on the sticky note, right? And I'm going to, so then that way we have it here so we can see all of our responses. So thank you so much. And if for some reason you are having issues, you can do that. You can type your response into the chat if that's easier for you, and we can transfer those over. But I want to make sure sometimes when we put it in the chat, it's hard to see everybody's responses, right? All on the same screen. Thank you, Carabelle.
Yeah. Did the other people were able to get in?
Yeah, because I see them.
Okay.
Yep. So again, like I said, if you could see my mouse here, it's the 1, 2, 3, this is the 4th little button down. And when you hover your mouse over it, it says sticky note. You can click on it and it'll pop up. And then you have the option of different colors, right? So you can change the colors. You can type in your response and click save. And then you can post your sticky note or move it around under each of the categories.
We have somebody else typing in the chat.
Okay.
Strive to the best example of yourself.
Oh, I love that. So I'm going to add that one too. So that's a positive one. So I'm going to put that under positive. Thank you so much for sharing. And again, folks, if you're having a hard time, that's okay. You can, type your responses in the chat. Thank you to those who have participated already. So it looks like we have 2 responses so far. First grade teacher, I can read, keep up the good work. The second was strive to be the best example of yourself. And Carol, I don't know if you remember
Let me see.
anything that a teacher said to you that had a long lasting impact in your life.
I remember just saying to her that I was getting a lot of bored in classroom, but I was bored, and she would tell me, you know what, you will get something that would make you feel like fulfilled. It's
Ooh.
just that this is not your topic. I remember seeing that. So every time I feel like that, I always think about her. I don't know. I saw it like a positive part. Like I remember we were just, I don't doing some science, but it was with more animals, and I didn't like it that much. And she was like, don't worry, you will feel something that is very powerful for you, and can you spend a lot of hours just doing that, and that means that that's your call. So, and this, I always remember her.
And you remember, you remember that. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I see another one coming in the chat. So thank you so much.
Follow your own mind. You are strong-willed.
I love that. All right. So I'm going to add that one to our board. Thank you so much for participating. So I put that here. Follow your own mind. You are strong-willed. Absolutely. So we'll wait just another minute or so to see what other responses that we receive. Again, you can either type it in the chat or you can use the feature. And, for myself, I definitely remember, it's interesting. In grade school, I remember, a lot of positive, uplifting things that my teachers would say. Like in returns to never give up, always try your best. Especially because I think that, when you're younger, it's incredibly frustrating when you can't get something, right? Like you keep trying, and maybe you don't understand a concept, and it's really frustrating. And so I think just like that positive motivation to never give up and keep going. I will say though, as I continue my journey throughout my, my academic career, especially, during my college years, that the feedback wasn't always that positive, right? And so I do remember, some professors being very critical, right? And maybe saying, this isn't necessarily, this may not be the best field for you, right? And this is when I was, in full transparency with all of you, you think in your mind, you have an idea where you're going in your career, and then, you shift things. And so when I first started out, it wasn't just that I was, I didn't think I was going to be in education. I thought I was going to be in the medical field. And, I do remember being in that biochemistry class, not doing as well as I would have liked, and getting that critical feedback. So I remember both. I definitely remember both of those things. So thank you so much to everyone who participated. What we're going to do now is we're going to just come back here, and hopefully you can still see my screen okay. Carabelle, looks good?
No.
You don't see anything?
I see your screen, but I see with the notes and everything.
Okay, so let me do this.
Now that you said it, I remember one of them that was not that good. I used to talk a lot in the classroom, and I remember having this teacher saying to me, you know what, you're talking too much. You need to change, to think about that. You need a career that you will be able to talk and to present and to have that critical thinking. And that helped me at the moment of choosing what I wanted to study and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. How's the screen look, Carabelle? Does it look okay now?
I think I see the same thing. I see the small, when you're presenting, you know that you split out in two of them, and one of them you have the letters and everything that is the notes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're sharing.
Okay. Let me,
Uh,
why it's doing that.
Christy, on my end, it's not showing that way.
Oh, it's not. Oh.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, okay. So I think, okay, Carabelle, I think your view is because you are you're a panelist. You're a co-host. That's probably why.
Okay.
Okay, good. Okay, awesome. So thank you so much for everyone who participated in that activity. I think the reason why we really wanted to start with that activity is because when we generally think about student engagement, we think about it from the perspective of how much a student participates in the classroom and how actively they are engaged in the lesson, but we don't necessarily think about it from the relational aspect of the relationships that students have with their teachers, and how that also plays a huge part into how actively they're engaged in the classroom, or not even just the relationships that they have with their teachers, but also the relationships they have with other students, right? And how that also plays a huge active role in engagement as well. And so we're going to get into this a little bit. We're going to get into this in more detail soon. But Carabelle and I today, what we're really going to do is unpack what student engagement is and the different dimensions of student engagement, and provide you with some critical strategies to help boost student engagement in the classroom.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay, everybody. So you remember when we started, we said that you need like a piece of paper or something. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna have 3 separate pieces of paper. We can use something like this, like I have in my hand, or something a little bit bigger that says stop, continue, and start. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep doing the presentation, and you're gonna write there what are the activities or things that you want to stop, that you want to continue doing in your classroom, and which ones are that you want to incorporate or start. Okay, and we're going to be doing this along the way, so we're going to keep reminding you of those things. It could be just one word or something that we are doing and saying that can help you in that part of what I can do. What activities or participations do I want, and why I want to incorporate that. Then maybe we can share in along the presentation. Everybody have any idea, questions about this? Have you tried it before? I know that Christy have do this before in other activities and things, and I thought it was a great idea, because sometimes we don't think about that, incorporating really the things that we're going to be learning in just right there. We forget about them. So that will be very good. Next slide, please. Okay, and why students' engagement is important? I would say, maybe it is important, but that's what, as a teacher, I'm supposed to do those things. So what about if I'm not doing it correctly? Or who can tell me how I'm doing things? So I have found Phyllis question that is defined that level of engagement in a classroom. And he have it like engagement, strategy compliance, ritual compliance, retracement, and rebellion. So it means a lot of them. And we will say, okay, I want you to join me here, and we can see if we can find something like it. Engagement means that students high attention and high commitment. And we want the students to feel like that they are just focusing on what we are learning and being able to understand everything that we are doing. Strategic compliance means that they are high attention but low commitment. That means that maybe they are there with you, they can understand what you're saying, but they don't see that what you are providing to them is really going to help them in the future. And that happens sometimes, and it happens every time. Retail compliance, it means I have low attention and low commitment. It means that we are here, our body's here, but our mind is not here. It's just flying away completely. So, and restricted means no attention and no commitment. That means that I am just there because I need to be here. And it's that I don't feel like I'm willing to do it. And these kids are the ones that they just get there because my mom said I have to take this class, or because the curriculum said that I have to take this class, but I don't like maths, I don't like science, or I don't like Spanish, or I don't like English, I don't like grammar. But they are there because they need to do it. But they don't bother you in the classroom. Just they like to drawing and they don't pay any attention of it. And there's no commitment of doing assignments or even the work. But then they will be rebellions also. Those are the ones that divert attention. That means that they will do things to try to capture the attentions of the other people. So that's very important in the part. I see somebody saying about the comprehension of the lesson. That's very good. That's very important in that aspect. And we want all of them to pay attention. But you know what? I remember when I was in a classroom, and sometimes we don't have all the time to be engaged. Sometimes we have one or the other one in just in one lesson, in one period of time. Sometimes we are just right there and then our minds just go in another way. Or we say something and you remember something that happens to you, like in the ice breaking. I was here, I'm a panelist, but when Christy asked me, I was like, I was just going back to that moment. And I remember, and it could look like I was not really committed because I was just thinking about it. And that's totally normal. And we sometimes have to think like this. We know that the kids have to be engaged, but there's sometimes that they don't get engaged for a long period of times. And we can integrate other things to be even better. And we are going to be learning about this. If you have any questions or you want to add something, just feel free to chat and write it over there. It will be wonderful to hear all about you. Next one, please.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carabelle. So really quickly, I'm just curious, when we even say the word, when we even say the phrase, right, like student engagement, what are some things that comes to mind? Like, what are some of the first things that comes to your mind when we say student engagement? And feel free to type those things into the chat. So what are some things that come to mind when we say student engagement?
There's a connection.
Absolutely.
In myself, I will be like this person that are in the front and is very vocal. That's what it comes to my mind when you're telling me engagement. That's so.
Yeah, I think about that too, Carabelle. Or what I picture in my mind too is like a student sitting in the front of the class with their hand raised, right? Like eyes directly on the teacher, hand is raised, their posture, right? Their body language, they seem to be very attentive to everything that you're saying.
They also said commitment. That's very good. Well behave, collaboration.
Keep them coming. I see them coming in the chat.
So that's very good. I also think about like that thing that you can see that they want to learn, that like thirst of learning. I remember being like that. I will always be like in front. I want to learn everything.
Eager, right? Like this eagerness. Yeah.
Yes. Is it also eager classroom participation? That's very good.
These are all great. Absolutely. So everything that you said in the chat, somebody said being involved, sharing comments, right? So like that active participation. Yes. So everything that you said in the chat essentially falls within this interconnected dimensions to student engagement, right? And so I know that you are constantly working to connect with your students because you all understand how critical, right, like engagement is to the learning process. And engagement really is this like multifaceted concept. It's not just about how often a student participates or raises their hand in the classroom, you know, so scholars really agree that, you know, engagement is interconnected, and the interconnected dimensions of engagement are really centered around behavior. So behavioral engagement, which really is the quality of students' participation in the classroom and school community. And I think all too often what we do, right, is we think about engagement really from that behavioral perspective, when really it's not just about the behavioral perspective, although we know that that's incredibly important. It's also about the relational aspect, right? And this, you know, this relational engagement and the quality of students' interactions with their teachers and their peers in the classroom and their overall school community. And we're going to talk a little bit about that more, but I think that, you know, when we think about their relational engagement, you know, a student needs to feel safe, right? And that's in their space to learn, safe in that space to share, comfortable, and that space to make errors, right? Because, you know, you can't learn without errors. And so it's so incredibly important to create an environment that cultivates that safe space. And so lastly, cognitive engagement, right? It's really around students' emotional and cognitive interests and ownership and strategies for learning. So with that being said, and now really understanding, right, engagement from this multifaceted approach. And I'm going to ask, actually, Kadi, if you wouldn't mind launching the first poll. I want us to think about, out of all of these three engagement, these optimal engagement things that we mentioned, which one, right, do you think promotes the most optimal engagement in the classroom out of these three? And so we have the poll that's launched here.
I think this poll is launching them all at once.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just start with, we'll just ask folks, we'll just ask folks if you could just answer question one, that's okay. And so the first one says, you know, what dimensions of engagement promotes optimal participation in school? So again, the first one is relational engagement. So if you think it's relational, select that one. The second one is behavioral engagement. So we talked about how that is really like that active participation. Or the third one is cognitive engagement. So which one do we think? And you can just select your answer.
If you have any difficulties, you can also write it in the chat.
Yep. If so, for some reason you don't see the poll question on the screen or you can't select your response, you can also type it in the chat. So again, what dimension of engagement promotes optimal participation in school? And this, again, is just strictly based off of, you know, your opinion, right? So what do you think?
I think for me is a very relational. It's between the relationship and that I have as students with the teacher, or when I was teaching also the teaching part. So I would say it would depend on those.
Yeah, and I see some responses coming in. We're just going to answer question one. For some reason, the poll launched all of the questions that we're going to be using throughout the presentation today. So we're just going to answer the first one, but I do see the responses coming in. It looks like folks are saying behavioral engagement. And so we'll wait to see if we have any more folks that will actually select their option before we share the results, but it looks like mostly, you know, the responses that are coming in are around behavioral engagement.
Yep.
So I am going to, we'll wait another minute or so just to see. And we don't have any responses coming in through the chat. Do we, Carabelle?
No,
Okay.
At the moment.
Okay. All right. So again, it looks like mostly people said behavioral engagement. So that was definitely a great guess. It's really interesting because looking at the literature and what researchers and scholars say, they actually believe that relational engagement is really what helps to create optimal engagement in the classroom. And I do think, Carabelle, that speaks to your point that you were mentioning. You know, if I have a great rapport with my teacher, if I feel safe in my classroom environment, if my teacher provides a space where I feel comfortable to make a mistake, right? And I feel supported in my learning, then I am more likely to be engaged in the classroom, right? Same thing goes if I have, great relationships with my peers in my classroom. And, they also have cultivated this space where we make mistakes, but we encourage each other, right, to keep trying. That also helps to really increase and boost student engagement in the classroom. So our goal for today is to provide you with different strategies that you can implement in the classroom that will help increase student engagement as it relates to these 3 dimensions. So the first one that we'll take a look at is behavioral engagement. And we talked a little bit about what this is, but just to reiterate, behavioral engagement looks like how often a student raises their hand to participate, right? How often a child is engaged in participating in an active discussion. It actually touches on a lot of the things that all of you have placed into the chat. There are many strategies to support behavioral engagement in the classroom, and a lot of the strategies that we're going to provide today are very simple, easy to implement strategies that even after today's webinar, hopefully you'll be able to take that information and implement fairly quickly. So the first strategy is creating classroom expectations. So creating clear expectations really helps to increase classroom engagement and participation. I think as adults, we often assume children know what we expect from them, right? When in reality, we have to be very explicit about our expectations and remembering that behaviors are the companion for academics. And repetition is really key to learning new skills. And so this same concept applies, and we know this to be true, especially when we are teaching academic skills, but that same concept applies even when we are teaching behavior. And all too often, in the beginning of the school year, we will review maybe what our classroom rules are, and we never revisit it, right? And we have this expectation that our students understand what those rules are and they should just be compliant. But I wanted to drop some facts on you that may be helpful, and it kind of ties this all together. And I know when I've presented on this information before, all the educators that I work with are always like, what's that one thing you always tell us about when a child learns something new? And so it's for a child to learn something new, really, it needs to be repeated on average of 8 times. So really think about that. For a child to learn something new, it needs to be repeated on an average of 8 times. So think about if you have even kids of your own, if you have nieces or nephews, think about when you taught your child how to tie their shoes for the first time, right? Did they get it right away? So I know myself, I have a daughter. I remember teaching her how to tie her shoes, and no, we had to practice it multiple times, over and over and over again, right? And perhaps we needed to even use a different strategy, in order for her to really understand, how to be able to tie her shoes. Or think about riding a bike. The first time you may have learned how to ride a bike, did you get it the first time? No, not at all, right? It required a great deal of practice. And so I think what happens is with some things, we think, you know what? We'll get that, we'll get that right away. And then with other things, we take our time and we explain it. And so all too often with behavior, we don't allow our students enough practice and repetition to learn the skill, because essentially behavior is a skill, right? And so another thing that I wanted to mention is, so for a child to learn something new, right, like I said, it needs to be repeated on an average of 8 times. But for a child to unlearn an old behavior, right, and replace it with a new behavior, the new behavior must be repeated on an average of 28 times. So think about that in terms of, let's just say, behavior, right? And think about it in terms of when, I tell you to be respectful in the classroom. Well, being respectful in the classroom and being respectful at home looks very different.
Mhm.
And so it's important that we teach those skills, it's important that we teach those skills not just once, but we teach them throughout the entire school year to reiterate those skills and make them become more of a habit. So when creating classroom expectations, there are a few things to remember. You want to select a small number of expectations. Typically, students can easily remember anywhere from 3 to 5. We want to make sure that the behavioral expectations are stated positively. So in other words, we want to tell students what you want them to do, right? As opposed to what not to do. So this prompts students to engage in desired behavior. So an example of this would be, instead of saying, don't yell in class, right? You would say, raise your hand in class. So we want to make sure that we are emphasizing the behavior that we actually want to see. Your expectations should be general or broad enough that they include the full range of expected behavior and can apply across all routines and settings. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail when we go into the next few slides. Something else to remember is that all students should be able to understand the vocabulary that is used. I think this is very important. When we're talking about generalizing skills across multiple grades, is that the expectations apply whether a student is in 1st grade or if they're in 6th grade, right? And it's important to describe what we want the behavior to look like. So I know I gave the example earlier where I said, being respectful at home looks different than if you're being respectful in school, or, if you're being respectful in other places. So for example, being, let's just say, responsible in the bathroom may look like flushing the toilet, and after you use it, making sure that you put the paper towel in the trash after you wash your hands, right? But being responsible in the classroom may look like, I need you to have all eyes on me, right? I need you to, maybe not have things on your desk. Again, making sure that we're very explicit in our direction when we're explaining what the behavioral expectations look like in the classroom. So here are some examples of some expectations that a lot of schools have used and a lot of schools use. Again, you'll see that they're very general, right? So they can apply to multiple settings or multiple routines throughout your day. So here's, like I said, a few: respectful, being responsible, being safe, right? Again, what does it look like to be safe in the classroom versus maybe what it looks like to be safe if you're in the hallway, or even if you are outside of the school grounds, right? That looks very different too. Or what does it even look like to be safe when you are maybe outside playing on the school grounds? So when you think about creating your own classroom, we like to call this a classroom behavior matrix. Again, like I said, the classroom behavior matrix really outlines your expectations and procedures specific to your classroom. So this would be another good time to pull out a piece of paper and a pen. You can easily replicate this chart and create a similar one on your paper. So you should basically try to create like a chart or a box. You can have 5 rows. So it's about 5 rows going across and then 5 columns going down. And I'll just pause here to give folks a second, to grab that pen and paper. and to kind of set up your matrix, your classroom behavior matrix on your piece of paper. And then I'll explain the next steps. So again, you just want to kind of draw a box. Again, you should have 5 rows going across and 5 rows going down. So each column, right? So those are kind of on the left-hand side here, you'll see on my screen, you'll see that this teacher, the way that they set it up is they put what their expectations were here. So for example, their first expectation is respectful, right? And then going across each row, they put what their procedures are in their classroom. So what are, their normal procedures throughout the day? So in this case, it was entering the classroom. Again, if you're still in a virtual setting, you could put, entering the virtual classroom, right? There's still things that students need to do and understand what their expectations are. Again, this one was more, in person. I know a lot of schools are making the shift back to in person. So I think that this can be easily adapted to both a virtual setting and in-person setting. But in this case, the second one was working at your desk, right? What are the expectations? What do they look like? What does it look like to be respectful when you're working at your desk? The second procedure was when you are done working. Right? When you're done working, what am I supposed to do? Because if I don't know, that's a perfect time, right, for me to be less engaged, right? And even maybe engaging in some more distracting or problem behavior because I don't necessarily have anything to do, or I don't know what the instruction is. I don't know what I should be doing. And then the last one here for this case was exiting the classroom. So really quickly, just thinking about setting up your own classroom behavior matrix, what are some of your typical procedures or routines that you can just share in the chat? What are some of the typical procedures and routines throughout your day? So we know obviously entering in the classroom is one of them, be it virtual or be it in person. Transitions may be another one. So if we're transitioning from one activity to the next.
Or even a room when we are in person, going from one room to another one.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Manners, people
Mhm.
say. Personal space.
Right? So morning and afternoon time. And remember, your routines and procedures are the things that you're doing on a regular basis, right? In your classroom. So that could be, again, working at the desk. That could be group time, right? So if there's time where you have group time or when, your whole class is coming together to participate in a activity.
I like the one of personal space.
Mhm.
What will be that doing in the classroom? What will be that working with a team? We can do that.
Yep. And now with COVID, we have to be explicit about personal space. And so, I would say that would probably fall under, if you look at at what your rules would be, under safety, right?
Mhm.
So in terms of being safe, I would say, we need to make sure that we are, oh my goodness, they keep changing it, honestly. First it was 6 feet apart. Now I think it's 3 feet apart. But again, making sure that we're explicit about that. And even with our younger students, showing them what that looks like, right? And modeling what that looks like is incredibly important as well.
Yeah, that's very important because, okay, I have to be 6 feet apart, but how can I talk to the teacher or ask her a question? Where can I stand up now that we may be transition face to face, or even in the computer, in virtual? How how close I'm going to be to the camera, or how can I tell the teacher about things.
Yep.
Respectful when others are sharing. That's very important also.
Yep. So I would put that right. So you'll see here, it says that one of the rules is respectful. So you can have respectful as one of your overarching rules or expectations. And then you would say, sharing with others, would fall under, basically if you want students when they're working at their desks, what would you want them to do? You would want them to share with others. Any other rules or expectations that are incredibly important? Oh, I see some things coming in the chat here.
Greeting each other, morning meetings to learn about activities for the days, and sharing one thing that happens to us, value each other, response, ready to give ideas. Those are very good.
Yeah,
Very good
absolutely.
examples.
I love greeting each other. I think that's a great one, especially for entering in the classroom, and that's a form of respect. But do you see how we're really, and we use this term when we're talking about behavior, but we're operationally defining what the behavior looks like and not assuming, right? So if I say to a student, oh, you weren't being respectful, or I need you to be respectful. Well, guess what? Carabelle's definition of respect and Miss Christie's definition of respect, right, may be something totally different. And so we need to be very explicit about defining what respect looks like, right? Or what safety looks like, or what responsibility looks like. So yeah, definitely. I love the morning meeting one though, too. I think that's great. I think that will fall under one of your procedures or settings for your typical routines or things that you do, and then defining out what does it look like to be respectful during morning meetings? What does it look like to be safe during morning meetings?
Somebody else also share sensitive to others. That's very good.
Yes, empathy is, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we kind of worked through this a little bit more, as we talked through all of the items that all of you were kind of putting into the chat. So that was incredibly helpful. So our second strategy is all about increasing opportunities to respond. And so opportunities to respond are essential to increasing overall learning, electing feedback from the class, and increasing on-task behavior. So providing opportunities to respond, and opportunities to respond is really just providing questions to the class, right? Like asking questions to the class and eliciting feedback. So providing these opportunities to respond at a steady pace can be very useful when we want to increase student classroom engagement. So there's a few things that you really want to keep in mind though, when implementing this strategy and implementing it effectively, right? So when asking academic questions, we want to make sure that they are relevant and apply, right, to students' experiences. We want to keep in mind that we also want to ask questions to the entire class, right, and individual students. And we want to try to do this at a steady pace. We also want to make sure that we're ensuring all students have an opportunity to respond to questions. And I'll provide some strategies in a minute on the next slide in order to do that. And the one thing that's really helpful when we are eliciting feedback from the class or asking questions is using this information to inform our instruction. So when students' responses, right, let's say if we're doing a choral responding, when we have the entire class, right, responding at once, and when we realize that students' responses are less than maybe 80% accurate from the new material that we're presenting, or maybe it's old material and we realize that 90% of the class is responding with the wrong answer. What that tells me as an educator is, you know what? Students could probably benefit from an additional review of the content. So when we provide these opportunities to respond, they really help to influence, how we're basically providing that academic content to the class. And I
Yeah.
did see we had some things that came into the chat. I don't want to miss that.
They said real life and participation. I think it is very important. Those things are the key of everything.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. So in terms of how to increase, right? Because the goal is we really want to increase that engagement through providing questions and providing opportunities to respond to the class. So there are some really cool strategies that you could implement. One is you could have each student use a small whiteboard, right? And so the whiteboards are just these little boards that students can actually write on. And there's so many ways that we can do this. So students can quickly write down their answers and hold it up to show you their response. That's a great way to increase opportunities to respond. You could also have students, if you don't have like whiteboards easily available, you can also use index cards or just pieces of paper that are two-sided. Right? So you can have students write yes or no on each side, or true, false, or agree, disagree with answers. And then you can pose the question and have students respond by holding up those cards. Right? So what that does is, as the instructor, as the teacher, now I can look out, and this can be done even over Zoom, right? Or this can be done in person as well. That's actually why I love this strategy. It lets me know as the teacher if the class is understanding the concept rather quickly. So, you know, if I have a bunch of students hold up the wrong answer, now I know, you know what? They're not understanding the concept. I need to go back and kind of review it again in order for them to understand. Another great strategy that I love is actually creating a student response jar. So you just take an old jar, you can put popsicle sticks with students' names on it, put it in the jar, and you can pull the students, you know, when you looking to have students respond and to make sure that everybody is actively participating, you can pull the popsicle sticks from the jar. So again, as a student, that keeps me on my toes because I never know, right, when my name may be called. And the last thing is just breaking complex problems down into smaller chunks, and then providing opportunities for students to answer, you know, each of those separate parts of the problem. Okay, so I am going to actually pause here, and we are going to, let me just take a look at time. So Carabelle, I know that your section is coming up soon. Do you want to give people about 3 minutes or so to go ahead and take a break?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's do that. So we're going to pause here.
I think it's very important for us in that engagement also, even in the classroom, to have just, if you see that our class is very big and too much time, we all know that our attention span is not completely 2 hours. So that's why we're also gonna introduce the breaks. We can do that in our classrooms, just one moment, everybody can just stand up, move around the classroom, go to the bathroom and come back.
Yep. Yeah, we like to call them like brain breaks, right? You give your brain a break. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're at the hour mark, so it's perfect timing. We'll take about, let's take 5 minutes. So we'll start back up at 1:35. It's exactly 1:30, and give you guys an opportunity, like I said, to just use the restroom, grab something to drink, and then we'll pick back up with strategy number 3, which is group communication.
Be right back. Hello, everybody.
Hi, welcome back.
Hi. So you know what I did, Christy, in
Yeah.
my break? I went outside
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and I tried, where I live, there's a lot of birds around here. So I just went outside and tried to hear them all.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's so important to have that moment to pause. And I think if even as adults, we need that, think about how critical it is for students, you know, to be able to, and I like to call them brain breaks, you know, because it's only so much information our brain can take in at once. And so, especially for younger students, what we found is it's incredibly helpful, like you said, Carabelle, to have them kind of move around, right? Or stretch, or there's even like all of these little clips online of like yoga or just, you know, quick little 5-minute activities and then bring them back to the lesson. So we thought that that was really important to incorporate into our presentation today for all of you as well. So I hope you had an opportunity to grab again, maybe something to drink, or like Carabelle said, maybe you had a chance to even go outside.
Yeah, there are people saying also that adults need that too. I think that
Yes.
also when I used to teach, I would take 5 minutes always, like in a class, I would between what the information that I'm providing and the activity that they have to fill out, I always think that it was very nice to have just a pause and maybe tell them, ask them about what they're going to be doing, taking for lunch or something like it, or what happens to the day, just
Yep.
to think a little bit about something else, just few minutes.
Yep.
That will also help us in the brain to switch again and to be able to pay attention again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, even with adult learners, teaching, for 3 hours at a time. So, you think about it, the concept is so ridiculous, and they really just having that opportunity to have a break and, come back and then process the information better. So I totally agree. So now we're just going to move into strategy 3, and then we'll shift over to relational engagement, and I'll turn it over to my wonderful co-host Carabelle, and she'll kind of lead us through that part of the presentation. But strategy 3 is all about group communication. And I think it's really important to mention this because people communicate in various modes, right? And so our communication style, even as adults, right? It changes depending upon our setting and where we are. We don't communicate with our spouse or our friends, right, the same way we would with our students in the classroom. And so, this same concept applies to our students too. Many students are aware of these different modes and have the skills, right, to adapt to different settings, but not all students are comfortable in doing so. And so we should provide, right, these, we like to call them like these linguistic comfort zones for students to communicate in ways that they feel most comfortable. And to overcome students' discomfort. Teachers really are encouraged to create hand gestures, right, or signals to be used during group learning. And so I have a quick little video that kind of walks us through this. It's really neat. And so I'm going to play the video. It's only like 2 minutes or so, but it kind of shows the different types of hand signals that you can even implement in your own classroom. Here's something to keep in mind, though. You don't have to use these, right? You can kind of create your own. And I think it's actually a great activity to use as a morning meeting. So this is a great way for managing class discussions online and offline. And it's a great way to get our students actively engaged in the learning process. The more that students feel that they have a stake in, right, the learning process and, helping to create the behavior norms and helping to create these hand signals and how we communicate, the more engaged that they'll be. So I'm going to play the video.
Discussions in a physical classroom are tricky to manage, and conducting them by video adds a whole new level of complexity. Good discussions are inclusive, equitable, and respectful. An agreed upon set of hand signals can reduce interruptions, allow more time to consider ideas, and provide a safe space that engages all learners. A pinky and thumb extended indicates agreement with the speaker. A single index finger expresses disagreement. One fist on top of the other shows that a student wants to build on what a classmate is saying. A raised pinky finger lets everyone know the student has a question. Making air quotes shows that a student can paraphrase a quote or concept. Students can use them to participate non-verbally, indicate when they want to speak, and how they'd like to contribute. At the beginning of every discussion, it helps to configure your screen so your view includes as many students as possible at one time. Review the hand signals so they are fresh in everyone's minds. Encourage students to use the signals to show they are engaged in the conversation, whether they plan to speak or not. Reinforce the importance of both speaking and listening by acknowledging nonverbal and verbal participants by name. With a little bit of practice, these hand signals can boost engagement and make for more equitable discussions by allowing more students to participate in ways that feel comfortable for them.
So just to reiterate what the video was saying, using silent signals really helps to create a learning environment with minimal distractions and allow students to feel comfortable participating in discussion. Some students are not comfortable, raising their hand and answering the question. And so some students may feel very anxious, right, about getting the question wrong, or may have a fear that their peers will laugh at them, if they don't answer the question correctly. So I think, some students are incredibly bright, but they may not feel comfortable actively participating in front of the classroom. And so I think it's incredibly important to give multiple ways, right, where students can actively participate and be engaged in the learning space. And really quickly, I'll share this story with you and then I'll turn it over to Carabelle, but I will never forget the time I was in high school. It was my freshman year. I had, just started. You can imagine as a freshman, you're already nervous, right? And I was placed in an advanced math class with all seniors, right? And I was like, oh my goodness. So keep in mind, I don't have my peer group, right? I don't have any of my friends. It's very intimidating as a freshman. Now you're in a math class with all seniors. And at that, it was geometry, right? So, I was so uncomfortable in the class. I was so uncomfortable in the class. And because of that, it definitely it affected my ability to be actively engaged. And I remember the teacher would call us to the front of the class to basically complete the problems on the board. And I was absolutely mortified. It wasn't the fact that I didn't understand the information, right? Like I understood the concept. I knew how to do the problem. I had completed the problem at my seat. But the moment she called me to the front of the class, and now I'm in front of, right, all of these other upperclassmen, guess what happened? My anxiety took over. I could not think. I think, again, I had just completed the problem at my seat, but I couldn't verbalize. I couldn't write down the steps on the board, right? It made me incredibly uncomfortable. And so I even think about these suggestions or these strategies that we're offering all, to all of you. And even when I was thinking about this, putting this presentation together, all these years later, right, I still remember that experience. That experience to me did not feel good in a space of learning. And so that's why I think, again, that when we think about developing our classroom, to be actively engaged, these are all things that we should strongly consider. Carabelle, I'll turn it over to you.
This is very, very good. And now we are in the relational engagement. I think is very important in that this part that we can talk to other persons and the other person can understand what's going on and that relationship. I always see it like we are dancing. I think that I love dancing and this because of that, that I remember being in a classroom that I don't like the material, but we being with this perfect teacher that I love the material and being able to understand what's going on. The quality of students interaction is very important, and the school community also will help you get that relationship in an adequate way. How the students move and talk to one another, the respectful, the motivation, the performance, it have everything to do with it. So next slide, please. Okay, now we're going back to our post-its and we can add something there. We have learned already in the stop column, on the continue, and in the start. In my case, I will add in the start that hand signals. When I do teaching right now, I will put that one. I want that one. And maybe I teach to adults, so I will use it with my adults. And I think that I will ask them, what could be the signals so we can develop them together? And something that I will continue will be the breaks. And something that maybe I could stop will be, I didn't think about the behavior that much in the engagement. I was always think that behavior was part of normal things the students will do. But then now I will stop thinking about that and I will incorporate what I just learned about Christine when she was talking about it. So if you want to share something in the chat, you can do it. Kirsty, do you think that you can add something that you will incorporate maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one thing that I've learned is, and this is, I'm gonna be honest, just not even in incorporating these things within the classroom, but even if you have, relationships with children, right? You have children in your family, you may have children of your own, right? Is like to stop assuming that they understand when we tell them, be respectful or be responsible or be safe. Stop assuming that they understand what that means, depending upon, especially depending upon the context and where we are. And so what I've learned over time is to really, to start, right, to be explicit in my directions and my expectations in terms of what that looks like. And so I think that those strategies have been incredibly helpful. I know that over time, the hand signals as well, I've seen that strategy implemented many times in the classroom. And oh my goodness, when I tell you, I've done data collection and I've done pre and post where I'll go in a classroom and it's before we've implemented that strategy and the engagement is very low, right? So the engagement may be only, 40%. And then I go back in after I've worked with the teacher and we've implemented this hand signal strategy with the classroom and engagement goes through the roof. Now it goes from 40% to now we're at 85% of having the class completely engaged. And so I think all of these strategies can be incredibly helpful.
One of them sharing in the chat that giving in direct information and one thing at a time. That will be wonderful.
Yep. Absolutely. Breaking it down step by step, right?
Yeah. I think that one is very important. So type of communication. When I was doing this part, I always think, I remember saying to my teacher, I didn't like most of the time talking in front of other people. And when they keep you asking you like going one by one, I always get so nervous. I was like, what about if I get the question that I don't know the answer? Or what do they think? They will think that I'm not that good at something. So for me, I think that we can communicate in a lot of different ways. We have verbal, nonverbal, we have visual, and we have writing. So it is very important to know that all our work is in all this type of language and communication. We communicate in all these ways. So it is very important. Um, I think that somebody writes in the chat, Christy, if you can tell me, I cannot fill up.
And you know what? They were responding to the activity to the
Oh,
start,
okay.
and they shared basically what they intend to do. So they said start with the greeting and the manners and continue with the classroom rules. So that's
Oh,
what it was.
wonderful. Very nice. So you know what? Other type of communication ways could be verbal. Okay, use a strong tone, but we can be strong, but not screaming. And that is very good for us to tell the kids, you know what? I'm speaking you very strong in the type of the speaking voice that I'm using, but I don't have to to scream or to tell you don't treat you respectfully. Use active listening. You know, when the kids ask you a question and you feel like you don't really understand, just come again and try to use what they're telling you. What we are doing right now in the chat, we are reading you and we are comment about what you just write. That's active listening. Avoid filling words. Sometimes we don't know what goes around, what is the end of that word. We can just ask them, you know what, tell me what's comes to your mind. We can develop what you're thinking to two of us. Nonverbal, it is important to just look what is happening there. If they're having like a question phase or what they're having right now, or they're moving a lot, you know, if I have a classroom and I know there are few kids are moving a lot in the room, I just take a break. Everybody stand up. Let's just try to touch the ceiling, or let's just make like we are running in the same place. That will help them. And that's not nonverbal communication in that part, visual. I think that for me, it's very important when I didn't was able to understand something and the teacher was able to tell, you know what, I have a visual here that can help you, or I have a picture of this thing. I remember when I was doing math, I always loved that our teacher have us have the numbers in our desk. So that way I can see them, because it is important. Maybe we have kids that have disabilities and they don't understand it is a 5 or is a 2, or they have different. So it is important to have all of that in consideration. Right, and maybe we have kids that doesn't want to talk in front of them, but they are willing to write about it. So it will be good for them if you want to tell them, okay, you know, if you want to love to participate more in a writing way, you can just write it and I can read it later and we can come back. So that's very important. Next slide. So we have positive communication. So I love this part and I think it's very important to all of us, okay? Respectfully. I think that respect is the base of everything. I can tell you that you are doing a great job. I can tell you that you are not doing such a great job, or that you need to behave a little bit better. But if we use a tone and we use the active listening, and if we can respect each other and have that eye contact with that student, and maybe even talking to them when the other ones are not part of us in the whole meeting, that will be very nice. I see that people are writing in the chat. Maybe you can help me, Christy.
They're just agreeing with you. Tone.
Okay.
Yep.
That's very, very good. Okay, and repeat your message. You know, sometimes, like Christy was saying, we need 8 times to say the new thing so people can understand us. And for us, I worked with Christy with this presentation, and I told her, you know what, I'm just gonna do this. And I explained it to her what is my idea was. And we are talking the same language, but maybe she will tell me something. I was like, I don't really understand you. And it's okay. It's okay. I think that part is very important, to be able to repeat yourself of what you're thinking and what you're saying. Check understanding. What I do most of the time, I use the next or not. When I'm doing presentations, I go, can I go to the next slide, or do we need a little bit more information here? Or, you know, we have time. I always schedule with a few more minutes, just in case somebody have a question that I didn't think about it. And it's part of that positive communication, nonverbal. I know that I am answering you and I'm trying to do my best, but I don't see it in your face. Maybe just doing a recap the next day will be helpful for that student, or providing more visuals, or asking them, what do you think it will be helpful for you to understand this topic? And I know that all of you do this, but sometimes we don't know that we are doing positive communication, and it is very important to us to do that way. We can go, and it is also, these are also part of them. We have say environment, we have teamwork, getting involved, active listening, positive feedbacks. It is very important to us. I think that we have a poll question in somewhere, Christy.
Yes, so the poll question, we can go ahead and launch it. But you know what? It's going to launch with all of the other questions
Okay.
too. So let me just scroll down.
Chrissy, I
Okay.
just relaunched it.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So you should see a poll question on your screen. It's actually, we're going to answer poll question number 2. And it just says, what type of communication do you view as signs of engagement in the classroom? Okay. There's 4 different responses: verbal, eye contact, body movement or posture, and writing. So you just give folks a second.
Well, which one do you use, Christy? Which do you think is more important?
So I do believe that all of them are incredibly important, but I think I think one of the things that we have to consider as educators is, just because one of those things may not be happening doesn't necessarily mean that the student is not engaged.
That's very good.
Yeah, so I think but I do think all of them are important, right? But I think it's incredibly, it's like I said, we have to be mindful of that too, that a student may not be giving me eye contact, and it could be for a number of different reasons, right? It could be due to, culturally, right? In some cultures, eye contact is actually a sign of disrespect. Right. And so I think there are all of these things or factors that we should consider. But that's why I think this information that you're presenting, Carabelle, is incredibly important. So again, we're just answering question number 2. Responses are coming in. So far, Carabelle, it just says that folks are saying verbal, they think is really a sign of engagement in the classroom.
That's very good. Let me see. I would think that body movement, even that, for example, for myself, I be very calm when I'm engaged. When I'm not engaged, I start moving my feet, I start moving around. And sometimes it's just that my back hurts, but sometimes when I'm in a classroom, I will do that. And I know that I'm not engaging appropriately, or that I'm not really doing that. So I will go with body movement. That's what I use.
Yeah,
So
so we have some coming in the chat as well. Verbal, folks put verbal. Somebody said eye movement. That was another one. So it looks like a lot of people actually responded through the chat, which is okay. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and in the poll. And somebody is agreeing with you and said yes, children on body movement. That's definitely a sign as well.
that's very important to us to understand what's going on in our audience. So if we have the kids there in face to face, we can see them what they're acting. But if we have them in virtual, we can also see them. If they're just right like this, or they're just looking to other side. But also, there are people that will not see you face to face, and they're paying attention to what you're saying. So that's very important. So that's why active listening, positive feedback, I always like to use that. Like, I know that everybody's trying to pay attention, but maybe we are just tired. Let's just take a break. Or, you know what? I'm seeing everybody looking at me. Yeah, tapping on the desk, say, talking out loud in the classroom. So that's very good. Yes, we have to do that. And that we can use that as a positive communication. When I'm in the meetings and I know that I say something and somebody just didn't really resonate with me, I go, do I was clear what my message was? And that's a positive communication because we are acknowledge what people are saying. We are understanding what they want to do. And that's very important in that.
Yeah, I was going to also say that another great strategy is praising around. So if you see a student that maybe you think is not actively engaged, maybe they're, kind of like looking off into space or kind of looking out the window, maybe their tapping is to praise all of the students around them that are doing the right thing. So, again, I would say, Carabelle, oh my goodness, you're doing a great job looking at me, all eyes on me. I would basically, give a lot of positive attention and a lot of positive feedback to the students that are doing the right thing. And what you will see is that naturally that student that may be off task will start, right? That'll catch their attention. It's like, oh man, I need to pay attention because, the teacher is now looking at me. So that's also a very effective strategy too, is praising around.
That's very good. And I saw that somebody write facial expressions. So that's really, yeah, I use that. I use a lot of my hands and I use a lot of my muscles in my face. And I always say it, I'm Puerto Rican, so we talk with the hands. Positive rewards, that's also very good. And I'm just gonna provide you with providing students communication skills. How can we do that? It's not only that I have to do it, it's also that the students have to do it. Like I said in the beginning, it's just like a dance. We both of us have to dance at the same rhythm. And it's kind of difficult sometimes. We're not used to that. So model conversation skills, what's that? How can I improve that? Well, you know what? We can put a video and tell them, what have you listened? Everybody just grab a piece of paper and write 3 sentences of what they have told us. Let's talk about that. So that will help us modulate what really skill is that in that conversation, and how can we hear somebody and go back and listen to them, what they are saying. That's good. In technology, we can use audiobooks. Sometimes we have podcasts, we have a lot of different things that we have right now in technology. So we can, just like a class, take everybody, we're gonna listen an audiobook instead of reading a chapter. And we're gonna just make a small things to see what have we listened about this and what's going on. And if we have questions, we can talk about this. Ask about active listening, what we are doing right now. We are reading you in the chat and we are going back and telling what you are saying and commenting about that. That's a very good one also. Offer group presentation and assignments. I think that helps me a lot of team building. You know what? We can all work in this. We take turns and we can put those rules that we talked in the beginning about what is supposed to be a group. What is your main idea with the group? Okay, you know what? I want to do an assignment, a group assignment, but we are going to divide ourselves. Each person will do 5 slides. Each person will come on with one strategy or one skill that it's going to develop, or one topic or one sentence, and everybody can collaborate each other. And that will help them. As open-ended questions, you know what? I used to have this part. When I did a topic, I would ask the students to have a break. And when they come back, we're going to have open-ended questions. And they will ask them to me. Instead of me asking them all of them, they will ask me open-ended questions to me. So I will be able to see if they understand the topic. Critical thinking. I used to have a teacher that would give me newsletters, or will come with the papers and we cut them and we just read them and think about what we have just read about it. And it was right or wrong. And what were my feelings about that topic, that it was just in the news. So that's very helpful. learning opportunities. If I'm learning something or I'm showing to them a topic and I know that I have a student that is very passionate about this, I will get that student, you know what? Next day, I want you to help me build out the classroom. If I'm going to talk to you about something that I know that you're very passionate, I want you to be part of it. And teachable moments, just right like we are doing right here. Let's take a break. We are showing you that we need that. And being able to do that, it is very important. I think that for me, having seen this opportunity like this had helped me a lot in the process of showing people how to communicate, providing me with that critical thinking, or not being able to have the right words all the time, or not being the same page with my teams. It's very important. Being able to listen, because we communicate every day. Somebody saying something and you don't agree with them, how can I communicate that back? How can I make a question open-ended questions? That's part of that communication. So I hope that this part have helped you and you can incorporate it. I think that we are going next to a break. We're gonna have 5-minute breaks also, so we can just think about this part and just think about it. Did somebody else write something, Christy, in the chat?
They just are agreeing with you. Yep, they were
Okay.
agreeing with you. So what we're gonna do now is we'll come back at let's just say 2:11. I can't believe the time went by so fast. So we'll come back at about 2:11, and then we'll just wrap up with a few other. We'll talk about cognitive engagement. We won't spend a whole lot of time, but there is just a few other strategies that are fairly quick and we'll share with you. So we'll be back in just about 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, folks. So home stretch, just a few more slides to go. So we're going to kind of shift gears into our last dimension of student engagement. That's all around cognitive engagement. And cognitive engagement is really how students feel about themselves and their work, their skills, and the strategies that they use to kind of master their work. We did have another poll question. I'm not going to launch that though. I will just talk us through it. And so the poll question was really just about how you're feeling about the school year or the school year that just passed. I know that the year was incredibly difficult for educators, for all of us, for many reasons, right? I think every profession has had to, shift how they've typically have done things. And so poll question number 3 just says, if you had to describe how you felt about this school year, what would you say? And so we have a couple options here. It says, I felt great, right? This was the best school year ever. The second option says I managed. The last one, the third one says I felt anxious. The fourth one says it was very difficult. And the fifth one says, I wanted to quit. I see some responses coming into the chat here. Oh, thank you, Scotty. Yes, if you're comfortable, please answer. All the responses are anonymous. And so somebody said, I managed. I think, right, well, we all have tried to manage it the best that we can, considering the circumstances, absolutely. And like I said, to be quite honest, a lot of my closest friends are educators, and I know that they've expressed how very difficult this past year was for them for many reasons. But again, it seems like, we have more coming in. Yeah, overwhelming. Oh yes, absolutely overwhelming. We've all had to learn new ways, right, to provide academic support, to educate, to cope.
I have people here in Puerto Rico that they decided to retire.
Yeah, I've heard. Yes,
it's very difficult.
Yes, there's been a lot of articles that have been published recently too about, teachers again feeling very overwhelmed and again deciding to retire. And so the reason why I started with that question is because I really just wanted to show the range of emotions we all feel about this one topic in particular. And to be quite honest, the range of emotions we all feel on a daily basis. I mean, nearly everything we do throughout our lives depends on our emotions. Emotions inform our thinking, our decisions, the quality of our relationships, our physical and mental health, our everyday performance, our engagement, right, in the classroom, our ability to learn. And so essentially emotions matter. And so when we think about emotions, I always like to think about it as a keyboard, right? And some children start school having like all of their emotional keys, and others are lacking the keys that they need to be successful academically and interpersonally. And so it's really our job as educators, and not just educators, but parents as well, to really help replace the keys that are missing with the necessary social and emotional skills that will help them be successful academically and help them be engaged in the classroom. And so it's really about creating opportunities within the classroom to understand how our students are feeling. If I am overwhelmed with emotions, it is simply impossible for me to be engaged and ready to learn. And so think about it from this perspective, even as adults, right? If you're on your way to work, it's pouring, raining outside, and you hate driving in the rain, and out of nowhere, someone, hits your car. Thank goodness no one was hurt, but your car is pretty damaged. You somehow managed to get to work, right? Despite that, only to realize, your school leaders will be visiting your classroom today. How will you perform? I mean, the reality of it is, yes, most of us adapt in those circumstances, but it doesn't mean that we aren't still feeling those overwhelming feelings, right? And they do impact our performance. So I provided that example because our children come to school with many challenges as well, and they don't leave those things at the door, right? They bring them with them. And so these strategies are really designed for us as educators to be in tune to how our students are feeling in order for us to adapt our academic content and help with their engagement. And so one of the ways to do that is by creating dialogue journals. It's a great way to build student-teacher rapport. It provides a safe space for children to communicate their feelings with adults. This can be done virtually, using a doc or a shared doc that you share just with the teacher. Before the pandemic, that it was actually done using notebooks where each student had their own notebook where they would write to the teacher. This works very nicely as a do now or an exit ticket in the classroom. And then, what teachers have done is they respond to the students in their journals, right? And it may not be a very long response, or it could be very overwhelming to respond to every student, but what they'll do is maybe they respond to a group of students at a time. Another strategy is mood meters are a great way to start and end the day. You can put each student's name on like a clothespin and have students move the clothespin to the emotion that they're feeling, or identify their emotions in the morning or before they leave school. This again allows us as educators to see how students are feeling, if they're emotionally available to even begin learning, right? It also allows you to be able to problem solve any strong feelings that they may be bringing into the classroom before the lesson even begins. And even for our older students, I know maybe the emojis, right, are good for the babies, but even for our older students, the same concepts apply with using like a check-in worksheet, right, where the student can feel comfortable disclosing maybe how they're feeling privately to the teacher. I've had a lot of my educator colleagues and friends use this strategy on an ongoing basis, and it was so enlightening for them to understand maybe how a student felt after they submitted an exam, right, or before they took a test. And so a lot of times what I've seen them do, which has been incredibly helpful, is maybe they give them this sheet before they take an exam. And if they look through those sheets really quickly and they realize half the class is feeling anxious, guess what we need to do? We need to stop. We need to pause. And now we need to, practice some, self-regulation strategies of deep breathing, of belly breathing, of maybe stretching, right? To get everybody in a calm state of mind. And then we move forward with the academic lesson, realizing that now that they are their minds are now available to learn. I think one thing that's really important too as educators is not being afraid to model these strategies for your students. And using them yourself, right? So, Miss Christie is feeling, overwhelmed or anxious today, right? Using that emotional vocabulary to give students the vocabulary to be able to express how they're feeling about how when they initially come to school.
So they are sharing some thoughts about the emotions. I want to
Yes.
share with everybody.
Mhm.
Emotions are real, but we are in charge. That's very good. This school year was very challenging, but with an exceptional technology benefit. So that's very good. Somebody else says weather checks. So that's very nice. And team decision. I think that's very good also.
Mhm.
Thank you very much for everybody to sharing those things. It is very important.
Yeah. And so one of the other strategies that I found very helpful, and this can be done virtually too. Of course, it looks a little bit different. It actually requires, creating like a virtual website where students can go and kind of click on different things. And so in that space, they would be able to like click on like a virtual video that'll show them breathing strategies and things like that. But like I said, we are shifting, right? We are slowly and gradually making our way back into the classroom. And so one of the things that I strongly encourage you to consider implementing is creating a classroom safe space that students can use. These are things that are called, you can call them whatever you want. I've heard them called Zen zones or peace corners, right? Or the chill zone. Essentially, it's just a space within the classroom that students can utilize to regulate their emotional state. Right? The purpose is to really teach self-regulating behavioral strategies and help students regain control of their emotions. So having a calm down corner includes teaching and practicing like those social emotional skills students need, right? That really help to strengthen their ability to regulate strong feelings. And keeping in mind that by allowing them to practice these skills in the classroom, we strengthen relationships, we strengthen engagement, right? We strengthen communication and their ability to manage their emotions. So just really quickly to clarify, there is a difference between timeout and the reflection corner. The old strategy of timeout is really seen to be reactive and punitive. It is owned by the adult, right? So the adult now sends you the timeout and it excludes you from the rest of the class, right? But the reflection corner or the calm corner is really meant to be proactive. It is that the student owns it. Right. So I now learn how to self-regulate my emotions. When I know that I'm starting to feel anxious or upset, I can now say, Carabelle, can I go use the reflection corner? Do you see that? So we're teaching that skill of how to really regulate your emotions, and we're not excluding the student from the classroom environment, right? It's inclusive, meaning they can still hear the lesson. They can still be present for the lesson, but they're using that space in order to regulate their strong emotions and what they may be feeling at the time. And this is just an idea of some things that you can have in that space. A timer is very helpful. So that way students can set a timer. This is just a kitchen timer. And then when the timer is up, that lets them know that they can come, right? They come back into, they may come back to their seat or come back into their, into the classroom environment. Books about feelings are really helpful. Some of those self-calming strategies are helpful. I've seen people put teddy bears, right, in that safe space, or fidgets. Again, all of these self-regulating strategies that are incredibly helpful for students. Okay, and I'm looking at
I
time.
also said that it was responsibility also. That's very good. We have that area will be very helpful.
Yes. And so just lastly, when you're introducing this to your classes, I would definitely make this a class activity where even having the students get involved. So introducing the idea to them, deciding on the name as a class, basically giving them examples when they would use that safe space, and establishing guidelines as a class, right? When a student needs to use that safe space, think about our hand signals. Maybe we develop a hand signal as a class that we use to let the teacher know I need to go right to the safe space. So I've seen in certain classrooms, they've used hearts, right? So if a student goes like this, they show the heart. That means that I need to now go use that safe space in order to calm down and regulate my emotions. The other thing to just remember is that you can suggest, right, that students use that. If you find that you see a student feeling, having very strong feelings or being very emotionally charged, you can add, right? You can give them a suggestion. Hey, Carabelle, I think it may be a good idea. What do you think? Do you think you should go maybe use the Zen zone or the chill corner, right? And suggesting that for them. But it's really not about directing students to kind of utilize that space. All right, so we're getting down to the end of our presentation. I wanted to kind of just pause here, Carabelle, see if you had any last minute thoughts. And then maybe we can go ahead and open it up for questions and evaluation.
Yeah, remember our start, stop, continue exercise? You know what? I like the corner part, and I really like how you describe it, Christy. So when I would do that, even for adults, I would do it. And the emotions, I have schools putting in, like, give them small faces, and the kids would just put them in front of their desk, or even in the virtual pages. So also that will be very important for them to express that. And we can go now to developing the classroom engagement plan. Okay, this is really important for you. We have shared different strategies with you, and we can develop this together. Behavior engagement, cognitive engagement, and relational engagement. And how can we all use this? For example, I would put in the behavior engagement that people need about the matrix. I'm going to develop that. I have it in my classroom. I'm going to put it in the cognitive part, maybe just remembering myself that I would say 8 times, I think, for them to learn. And also I can put a podcast or an audiobook, so that will help me with the kids to do a lot of more communication with them, and also can help me in the relationship engagement. So if anybody have any questions, you can ask them in the chat, or maybe in the Q&A also. You can just ask them and we will be able to answer them. In between you are with that, I want you to all feel free to do our evaluation. And I think that Kathy will also provide the link in the chat, so all of you can fill it out. It is very easy and it will be very helpful. I think that somebody asked part of a life skills course. That will be very good also, being part of that. And I think it is part of that. Maybe we could add something to our routine. Just do a mood check when we start a classroom, when we start a topic. Ask them if they understand what we were talking about. That will be very helpful. I'm also gonna write my email here just in case everybody wants to keep in communicating or have another ideas with us. I think that Christy could also write her email and we can all be communicating if you have any other idea or you have any questions.
Absolutely. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us, even if it's throughout the course of the academic year, and additional strategies, or any questions. We would be more than happy to help in any way that we can. I think Kadi did just put the link in the chat. If you could just take an opportunity to complete the evaluation, that would be incredibly helpful. As part of receiving the funding, we're required to submit data. And so if you could just take a minute, it's very brief. I think it's only about 4 questions or so. That would be great. And Carabelle and I will stay on if folks have any questions or any additional questions. Again, you can feel free to type those in the chat. It's definitely been a pleasure being here with you guys this afternoon. We certainly hope that the information was helpful and informative and you were able to take something away from the presentation.
And I will also say thank you, all of you, for sharing your personal things with us and to be able to provide examples. That's very good. And thank you to be there and listening and be part of this webinar about class engagement. And I hope that everything that we have said here, it makes sense to you. And if you can apply something, it will be great. And if you have a further question, because sometimes that happens. Sometimes we have questions when we finish. We go like, and what about this? I remember they said, but I wasn't able to put it in. You can contact us. If you think that somebody else it will be good for them to have this in their schools or have a webinar just like this, you can also contact us so we can maybe do something like it in your school. So I hope that it was very good. And if you have any questions, I see somebody saying excellent presentation, very informative and enjoyable presentation. Thank you. So thank you very much, Beverly, for sharing and saying those words. It means a lot to me. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Beverly. I'm so glad you enjoyed. We are wishing you nothing but success and a successful, academic year. And we're sending you tons of positive energy. And hopefully this will not be the last time we will be in front of you. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Have a good afternoon.